I am joined today by Dr. Jens Ambrock, the Head of Division Economy and Infrastructure at the Office of the Commissioner for Data Protection in Hamburg. Nice to see you again, Jens. Welcome to CIPL's first monthly podcast in 2023.
Yeah, hi, and thanks for having me here. These are thrilling times for friends of transatlantic data transfer.
Yes, indeed. I would say 2022 went out with a bit of a bang. We can probably all agree on that. We have seen the long-awaited Executive Order 14086 on enhancing safeguards for US signals intelligence activities come through on October 7th, accompanied by the Attorney General issued regulation on the Data Protection Review Court that is to be established, and then of course the EU-US Data Privacy Framework, or DPF for short, the former Privacy Shield that is updated, and we've got the Commission's draft adequate decision in time for Christmas, evaluating the data privacy framework on December 13th. And then just one day later, also, we received the OECD's declaration on government access to personal data. So that was equally long awaited, I would say. So there was a lot going on. We all had a lot of reading material over the holidays, I think. And what we have also seen is a virtual flood of commentary and ad hoc evaluations of the DPF. And I have to say that your agency's press release that came out towards the end of November really stood out to me for two reasons. One, for its careful considerations and on the whole quite positive view, but perhaps more importantly, even for what I saw as a sort of call to a balanced review and an open-minded review, a bit away from the almost reflexive voices that we've come to expect. I think that was a very important message to make in light of also what is at stake here. And so I'm really very happy and pleased to have the opportunity to get your views this afternoon on some of the questions that we have seen pop up on this. So if okay with you, let's start with maybe an easier one, but no less important question. What can we expect in terms of timing for the next milestones in this review process?
Yeah, as far as we are involved and as far as we know, the draft adequacy decision indeed had been published on 13th of December, as you've mentioned, and has immediately been sent to European Data Protection Board. The Common Committee of all European data protection supervisory authorities. And parallel to that, to the European Parliament and to a kind of committee of member states. So these three groups will all provide comments on that draft adequacy decision. Those comments are not binding. So in the end, we can be pretty sure, I guess, that there will be a final adequacy decision because the political will is there. At least the political leaders all do desperately want an adequacy decision. But nevertheless, those statements can be important. Maybe some changes are made according to the details. And those statements can give us an outlook of how long that new framework will survive. The European Data Protection Board at least has a deadline until the 28th of February. End of February, that is no strict deadline. The aim is to finish that statement and have a vote on that till the end of February. And I only can imagine that it might be similar with the other parties involved. And well, when that statement is finished, things can be pretty quick. At least one Commission official told us the final draft adequacy decision might be published half a year up to 1 year after that date in October, when the executive order had been presented.
Okay.
So half a year, that would mean April, up to 1 year, maybe up to October again. Things can be pretty quick when the process is finished, but we also have to keep in mind that the executive order provides a deadline up to 1 year for the security services, the intelligence services of the US, to actually implement the safeguards which are provided in the executive order. And as far as we know, at least some intelligence services might take up to 1 year.
Okay, so that was leads straight to my follow-up question. So nicely done. The EO obviously has immediate effect, but in your agency's press release, it seems to be suggested that there are some interim stages, perhaps for companies until the final adequacy decision, but also during the implementation period for the US that you've just mentioned. And so there are some questions around that, and some maybe more need for guidance on what impact this has for transfers to the US right now, before the adoption, after the adoption of the final adequacy decision, and sort of, as you said, the US services may need some time, the court is being assembled, etc. So what, in your agency's view, does this mean for companies transferring data?
Yeah, at the moment, we do not have any adequacy decision. We only have a draft. So we still have the status which we have had before. We still need to rely on standard contractual clauses and other transfer tools, which require, according to the Court of Justice, a transfer impact assessment. Via this transfer impact assessment, when conducting it, every exporter has to somehow assess the laws, the surveillance laws in the country where the data is sent to. Well, and that law in the US now has at least partly changed. That not all changes are enforced at the moment, but the executive order has immediate effect. But very important, the most important safeguards, for example, the principle of proportionality, that US security services have to always balance the rights between the data subject and the national interests. That is pretty new to the US law, and the security services have 1 year to implement that. And I've had the chance to speak to an official of the US Department of Justice who told me there are 18 several US security agencies in the US, and the executive order applies to all of those 18. And well, it's round about 2 months ago that I've talked to him, and he told me 2 months ago that 2 of them are finished already with implementing that. Some others are very close to finishing, but there also might be at least a couple of security services which will need that year. And the adequacy decision makes clear that the confirmation of the US government that implementation is finished, the adequacy decision can't get into force until that confirmation is made. So April, we all hope for April, but that might be a bit too quick. We
definitely are all hoping for April.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can understand that the processes within those security services totally need to change, not just little changes, but fundamental changes.
Yeah. it also shows, you know, the commitment, I think, on the US side that, you know, these processes are being put in place. And I must say I'm impressed by the speed with which they are undertaking the tasks. Some of them are already finished. So there's definitely a serious effort on the other side to realize this. Maybe turning to another question that comes up a lot as well. How will the final adequacy decisions, once we do have it in hand, impact transfers that are made outside of the DPF? So organizations to organizations that do not fall under the oversight of the FTC or the DOT, for instance. You know, banks, as an example, come to mind. Yeah,
indeed. Banks or the telecommunications sector. Indeed, some branches of companies in the US are not do not underlie the new adequacy decision when it's final. Indeed, so you still need to stick to the standard contractual clauses or alternative transfer tools when exporting data to them. So you also still need to conduct that TIA, that's transfer impact assessment. But, well, the executive order is something you can consider when conducting those TIAs. The executive order is not limited to certain sectors. The whole practical implementation, the whole doing of US secret services of all the 18 ones will be based on that executive order. So this is a strong argument. If even the European Commission as a legislator says that is adequate what they do, then it's a strong argument in your transfer impact assessment to say my standard contractual clauses combined with that executive order form an adequate level of data protection. As long as that the legislator's statement is in charge, that what the intelligence services do is fine, is according to a European level.
Okay, and that maybe is a good segue to my next question, which is a very German question in a manner of speaking, because we have seen, you know, a number of critical views of the EO come out, you know, across the board, but also, for instance, from your colleagues in Baden-Württemberg last year. And something that, you know, I hear very often is how consensus is reached amongst the German DPAs, and how can I, as an undertaking, for instance, be certain that, you know, the view that you've just expressed in terms of the impact of the EO is, you know, is shared with your colleagues. How do you represent a unified view in the EDPB that, you know, where you partake, when it seems that the German DPAs are not all of the same view, so to speak, on this particular subject?
Yeah, welcome to German federalism and welcome to my daily work. The short answer is we talk a lot. And before going to the formal aspects of finding a common voice, I'd like to stress, yes, indeed, I hear that often, that our assessment in Hamburg is totally different from the one in Baden-Württemberg, which had been published some weeks earlier. And I have to say, well, it is not really. The facts, at least, are the same. We both figured out that both authorities are not sure whether in the end the safeguards will be sufficient for the European Court of Justice. And we've pointed out which points are critical, and those points are basically the same. It's just the conclusion that the colleagues from Baden-Württemberg said, well, we are not sure if that's sufficient, but we are skeptical. And we in Hamburg, we said we also are not sure whether that will be enough for the European Court of Justice, but well, it's not that bad. So it's just a matter of the tone, but not of the facts. So we are in contact, at least concerning the facts. But yeah, how is consensus reached? Well, in the end, consensus is reached by a vote. Also, that's how it works in Europe. There will be this statement on the draft adequacy decision, and a European Data Protection Board has formed a drafting team. German members of that drafting teams are rapporteurs from Hesse and from the Federal Data Protection Authority. So not the Hamburg Authority. We comment a lot that the colleagues write that text. They talk to us a lot. For example, at the 31st of January, there will be a meeting on commissioner level in Germany where the first findings are discussed. And well, in the end, the European rapporteurs have a final text. There's a European vote of that. And before Germany can vote, there is a kind of preliminary German vote where all the 16 Länder in Germany and the federal authorities, so 17 authorities, 18 Bavaria has 2, have a vote on how the German vote will look like. So a lot to talk.
Yes, and of course we only have, you know, from the outside, we only have 2 data points, and there are other DPAs in Germany that also will get to voice their view. Before we close, you know, I just have to ask, and you sort of hinted at least to the outcome from the Commission side. I think we can all be fairly certain. But you know, I have to ask questions, and maybe you can't answer it. But what are your predictions on the outcome for the EDPB review of the draft adequacy decision? Positive?
Well, this is highly speculative, and for the time being, I do not know how the EDPB voice is going to be. This is why I can speak freely. There is nothing to spoil at the moment. Well, it is complicated. It is a different task because apart from the normal situation, we have to assess a legal system which does not enjoy the practical implementation yet. And in the end, the practical implementation is what is really interesting, because we have phrases like proportionality, which sounds good, sounds like European fundamental rights system. In the end, many have reasons to believe that the practical implementation might not be as it would be in European law, that the American phrase proportionality is different than the European phrase proportionality. So we have to wait, but we cannot wait for the practical implementation. This is, if I have to give you an educated guess, I'm sure the statement is going to be skeptical, but well, the question will be how skeptical it is. And I could imagine that it's going to be similar then to the statement to the United Kingdom adequacy decision. That also had been very skeptical, critical aspects were pointed out. But in the end, there had not been a clear statement, no clear solution, more or less a soft recommendation that that adequacy decision is not perfect. I could imagine that the text is going to be similar, but I simply don't know.
Thank you. I mean, in the end, we also have to remember that adequacy doesn't mean one-to-one, and I think that's also something you pointed out in your press release. So let's see. You know, we are all sitting on the edge of our chair for sure, because you know, clearly this is an important decision, and we do need a solution here. I think that much is clear to all of us. Thank you so much, Jens, for your time this afternoon, for your insights, and hopefully we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.